they're very close friends, he and Johnny. But they'd get involved. This was a big moneymaker. You know, this made an awful lot of money.
Here's Johnny. We all know this drawn-out intro as the cue for king of late-night television Johnny Carson to make his appearance. But what of the man who says the intro? You may have missed him, but this man sat next to Carson himself throughout every interview and was even paid handsomely for that. We're talking about none other than Ed McMahon. Ed McMahon, known for his iconic laugh, concealed a weighty secret that he struggled to conceal until he reached his limit. Ed McMahon was Johnny Carson's sidekick. Yet, he died broke and homeless. How did he end up dying in such a miserable state? Find out all about his story and more in today's video. Before he became Johnny Carson's sidekick, Ed McMahon was living an entirely different life coming from humble beginnings. He was born Edward Leo Peter McMahon Jr. on March 6, 1923, in Detroit, Michigan. His parents were Eleanor and Edward Leo Peter McMahon Sr. Like him, his father was also an entertainer and worked as a fundraiser. Even though he was born in Detroit, the young McMahon spent his early years in Lowell, Massachusetts, where his paternal Aunt Mary Brennan lived. Even at a young age, he was a self-supporting young man, even taking on work as a carnival barker in Maine for 3 years before working as a bingo caller in the state when he was 15. Before that, McMahon discovered at the tender age of 10 that he wanted to be a radio announcer. From here, he started creating radio shows of his own using a flashlight for a commercial while practicing commercials. His hard work is also what put him through college, serving as a pitchman for vegetable slices on the Atlantic City boardwalk. He got his first taste of broadcasting in Lowell, but his career stalled here due to the outbreak of World War II. Like any good man from the country, McMahon also wanted to serve his country. He had hoped to become a U.S. Marine Corps fighter pilot. However, prior to the U.S. entry into World War II, at least 2 years of college attendance were a prerequisite for both the Army and Navy. Since he was determined to be a pilot, McMahon attended Boston College from 1940 to 1941 and applied for Marine Corps flight training shortly after. His flight training took place in Dallas, followed by another in Pensacola. Here he earned his carrier landing qualifications and was appointed as a naval aviator. McMahon spent the next 2 years of his life as a Marine Corps flight instructor, then finally got his chance to join the Pacific Fleet in 1945. However, the atomic bomb attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki took place, so those orders were rescinded. Since he was still an active officer in the Marine Corps Reserve, McMahon was called to serve in the Korean War. This time, McMahon made full use of being an aviator, flying a total of 85 combat missions, which earned him 6 air medals. He remained in the Marine Corps Reserve until his retirement in 1966 as a colonel. After the war, McMahon continued his studies, this time thanks to the GI Bill. He enrolled at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., majoring in speech and drama and graduated in 1949. At the university, he was under the tutelage of American director and playwright Gilbert Hartke. Upon graduation, McMahon kept himself busy raising funds for a theater to be named after Hartke. He also took a job post that paid him $75 weekly at WCA. It was a new TV station in Philadelphia where he co-hosted a live program titled The Take 10 Show, which quickly became his own show. It only took 2 years for McMahon's career to grow in Philadelphia, and soon enough, people started to call him Mr. Television. The Catholic University was McMahon's gateway to success, and little did he know that a collaboration with a certain someone would make him a familiar face on TV. In 1958, Ed McMahon had the good fortune of meeting Johnny Carson, who was just a rising comedian at the time. The latter hired McMahon to be his announcer for a 30-minute afternoon comedy quiz show on ABC. His job was to introduce the contestants, do commercials, and occasionally talk to Carson at the start of the show. This show was none other than ABC's daytime game show Who Do You Trust? The show ran for 5 years from 1957 to 1962. Upon their first meeting, McMahon already knew that this would be the start of something good, even describing their first meeting as about as exciting as watching a traffic light change. Then finally, The project that would forever associate McMahon with Johnny Carson launched and changed the trajectory of his life forever. Shortly after Who Do You Trust? Carson moved to NBC, taking McMahon with him, and this time, for the long run. Together they worked on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, starting on October 1, 1962, where they would continue to collaborate for the next 30 years. I had to support him, I had to help him get to the punchline, but while doing it, I had to make it look as if I wasn't doing anything at all, McMahon said of his role in The Tonight Show. The better I did it, the less it appeared as if I was doing it. He was the voice behind the iconic drawn-out "Here's Johnny" intro. It was so iconic that it was used by Jack Nicholson's character Jack Torrance in the esteemed 1980s horror The Shining. Besides this, McMahon's constant laughter also became a staple in the show, earning him the nicknames of Human Laugh Track and Toy Maker to the King, with Carson as the king of late night. If Batman has Robin, Johnny Carson had Ed McMahon as his sidekick. On top of co-hosting with Carson, the task of hosting the first 15 minutes of The Tonight Show also fell on McMahon, though it did not air nationally. Besides that, he also worked as a guest host on more than one occasion when Carson himself wasn't available between July 29 and August 2, 1963, as well as for 2 nights in October the following year. They made quite a pair since Johnny Carson was known for being reserved and thriving on quick, witty banter, whereas Ed McMahon was known for being gregarious. Despite working with Carson for decades, McMahon shared in an interview later on that he would still get butterflies in his stomach every time he would walk out on stage. On top of being an MC, Ed McMahon also had his hands full doing in-program commercials for various sponsors of The Tonight Show, Alpo Dog Food, and Budweiser Beer as his most prominent ones. These gigs he also ran on other programs, and between 1970 and 1980, McMahon appeared in various American Family Publishers commercials. Ed McMahon also finally bagged his own show, hosting the weekly syndicated series Star Search. The project took off in 1983 and it helped launch the careers of many artists, singers, comedians, and even choreographers. He served as its host until the show wrapped up in 1995. In 2003, a CBS revival of the series aired, hosted by Arsenio Hall, and McMahon made a cameo appearance. His work on commercials also paid off big time because his long association with Anheuser-Busch was the reason why people started calling him Mr. Budweiser. His close ties to this esteemed brewing company allowed him to bring them as one of the largest donors to the Muscular Dystrophy Association, MDA. The MDA is a non-profit organization whose aim is to support people living with muscular dystrophy, neuromuscular diseases, and ALS. He had a couple of hosting projects in the 70s until the early 90s, which included co-hosting the Jerry Lewis MDSA Telethon, a long-running live annual Labor Day weekend event. Then he also hosted several TV series like TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes on NBC with Dick Clark from 1982 to 1993. Ed McMahon also had several film roles under his belt. He made his first film debut in the 1967 American neo-noir thriller The Incident. Then, in the newer version of the movie Dementia, he did the added narration on the film, even though the original movie had music without dialogue. In 1977, he played the supporting role of Charlie Blanchard in the American comedy Fun with Dick and Jane. McMahon was also supposed to make an appearance in Adam Sandler's 1996 comedy Happy Gilmore. McMahon was hired to do an infamous fight scene with the comedian, but according to Sandler, the renowned TV host backed out after finding out about the movie's crude humor. The role ultimately went to American media personality Bob Barker. His last film appearance was in an independent rom-com movie titled Jelly. He acted alongside Natasha Lyonne, portraying the role of Mr. Closure. Besides doing work as a host and in several small roles, Ed McMahon also fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a radio host. He served as the communicator or host of the Saturday afternoon segment of Monitor from 1965 to 1969. During the early 2000s, McMahon was still active on television. In 2004, he became the announcer of Alf's hit talk show on TV Land. His work also extended to several game shows such as Who Done It, Missing Links, Concentration, and snap judgment. McMahon was married 3 times in his life. His first marriage was to Alice Frell on July 5, 1945. At the time, McMahon was still working as a flight instructor in the Marines when they tied the knot. The couple had 4 children together, namely Claudia, Michael Edward, Linda, and Jeffrey. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't last, and the two called it quits in 1972 with the divorce finalized in 1974. It didn't take long for McMahon to find love again, and he married his second wife, Victoria Valentine, on March 6, 1976. They adopted a daughter named Catherine Mary in 1985. And like his first marriage, this one also didn't last. By 1989, the couple had separated. McMahon provided spousal and child support worth $50,000 to his ex-wife monthly. His third and final marriage was to Pamela "Pam" Hearn, a single mom who had a son named Alex. They tied the knot on February 22, 1992, just 3 months before his run at The Tonight Show came to a close. Working right next to Johnny Carson and landing several commercial gigs should have set up Ed McMahon for life. So, how did he end up dying broke and homeless? Despite being a household face on late-night TV, Ed McMahon suffered terribly behind the scenes financially, especially in his later years. So, what exactly were these financial troubles? Didn't he used to earn approximately $5 million per year? For one, Citibank sued him back in 2008 to recoup nearly $200,000 lent to the entertainer. Besides this, McMahon was also reported to be behind $640,000 in mortgage payments. He finally talked about his financial difficulties during a guest appearance on Larry King Live back in 2008. There he detailed how the Great Recession and his neck injury were the main reasons why he found it hard to find a stable job, thus leaving him behind in payments. Well, if you spend more money than you make, you know that happens, McMahon told Larry King back in 2008. And it can happen. You know, a couple of divorces thrown in, a few things like that. And you know, things happen. You want to be perfect, but with that combination of the economy, I have a little injury and I have a situation and it all came together. His wife, Pamela McMahon, also added how they did not have millions of dollars, which was a pretty common misconception about them.